Razer's Blade 14 is a premium gaming laptop with amazing build quality, great battery life, a beautiful OLED screen, and good performance for its size. All things considered, it surprised me. It's a great little 14-inch machine, but there's one thing preventing me from recommending it. But first, the build, as that's where the Blade really shines. The Blade 14 features Razer's signature CNC aluminum chassis with anodized matte black finish. This gives the Blade a more premium look and feel compared to all other laptops out there. It's the closest a Windows gaming laptop gets to the solid build of Apple's MacBook. The only downside is the black finish is a fingerprint magnet, but it's not too difficult to clean with a microfiber cloth, and you could avoid that with the optional mercury finish. Overall build quality feels great. There's hardly any flex during normal use, but if you're going out of your way to bend it like I did, there was a bit more flex to the lid than I'd like. But it feels sturdy during normal use, and the lid doesn't wobble when typing. The hinges feel smooth and sturdy, and I didn't notice any problems if I push it back too far or rip it open too fast. The surface area the hinge connects to doesn't look that big, but it's metal on metal, so it should be good. There's a small indent on the front to help make opening easier, and the screen goes back a reasonable amount. The Blade is extremely portable, and great if you need to travel with something but still need performance on the go. It's the thinnest 14-inch gaming laptop we've ever tested, coming in just slightly ahead of Acer's Triton 14. The Blade 14 by itself weighs in at 3.5 pounds or 1.6 kilos, increasing to just under 5 pounds or 2.2 kilos with a 200-watt charger included. Without the charger, it's one of the lightest 14-inch gaming laptops we've ever tested, only slightly beaten by Acer's Triton 14 and Asus's Zephyrus G14. But honestly, this difference is so small, I doubt you'd notice it. The Blade falls back a few positions when we include its 200-watt charger. The power brick feels relatively light to me, but the data says it's not quite as light as other laptops tested. My Blade 14 is powered by AMD's Ryzen 9 365 processor, Nvidia's RTX 5070 graphics, 64 gigs of RAM, and a 14-inch OLED screen. But you can customize it a fair bit when ordering with the link below. And if it has a good sale, we'll list it on our gaminglaptop.deals website so you can save money. The keyboard has per-key RGB backlighting, and it looks great, brighter and clearer than most other laptops. When you press the function key, it lights up the shortcuts you can interact with, and it's cool that things like volume mute show up in red to set it apart. Same deal if you hold shift. Different parts of the key light up to show what you can do. You can use the F10 and F11 shortcuts to adjust keyboard brightness. But as usual, Razer has far too many adjustments here. If you want to go from max to off, you have to press F10 like 15 times. And then in their Synapse software, you can adjust it in 1% increments, which is just far more granular than any other laptop. There are 7 basic lighting effects available through here too, but more customization is possible if you install Chroma Studio. You can also set the lighting on the lid logo to static, breathing, or off, depending on if the charger is connected or not. The keyboard feels great to type with. The key presses have a slightly clicky tactile feel, despite the spec sheet saying it only has 1mm of key travel. The only thing I didn't like was the small arrow keys, but at least the left and right aren't tiny like other 14-inch laptops, and the smaller right backspace might annoy some. Actually, another thing I didn't like is after a fresh boot into Windows, the keyboard lighting is off. If you press a key, it only stays on for less than 10 seconds and defaults to the spectrum cycling effect until you manually open the Synapse software. Either the part of Synapse that handles lighting should automatically start, or Razer should just copy Lenovo's homework and bake the lighting effects into hardware so they work without Windows. The power button is right next to delete and backspace, but by default, an accidental mispress doesn't do anything. You have to hold it for a bit before it goes to sleep, and you can turn that off in Windows anyway. The touchpad is big, smooth, and feels accurate to use. It clicks down anywhere except for the middle up the top. There are front-facing speakers on either side side of the keyboard, and more underneath on the sides towards the front. They sound pretty good with some bass. Not as good as ASUS's Zephyrus G14, but better than Acer's Triton 14. And that was with the EQ mode set to music, which was default. The Latencymon results weren't great in our 5-minute idle test, but not terrible like some others we've tested either. Port selection is basic, but gets the job done. There's a Type A and Type C port on either side of the laptop, and either Type C port can be used to charge the laptop with up to 100 watts, or for connecting a monitor. The display outputs offer a mix for connecting a monitor to the discrete or integrated graphics. But no Type-C going to the NVIDIA graphics means you'll need to look elsewhere if you're using VR. Getting inside requires removing 10 TR5 screws, all the same length. The bottom panel comes off on its own, no pry tools required. But we don't all have Razer laptops, so I'll leave a link to the tools I use to open laptops below. Once inside, we've got the battery down the front, single M.2 storage slot just above on the left, and Wi-Fi 7 card on the right. Wi-Fi performance was similar to other laptops with the same MediaTek card, so it's not as fast compared to Intel/killer options, but it's still much faster than Gigabit Ethernet. Speeds from the installed 2TB PCIe Gen 4 SSD were great, and that goes for the UHS-2 MicroSD card slot too. The card clicks in and only sticks out a little, so you don't have to worry about bumping it, and you don't need fingernails to get it out either. Perfect. RAM is on board and can never be upgraded, but at least a benefit of that is its faster LPDDR5X 8000 memory. Razer at least offers the Blade 14 with up to 64 gigs of RAM, but 64 and 32 gig options are only available with the RTX 5070. If you want the RTX 5060, you're limited to 16 gigs, which kinda sucks. The upgrade score is on the lower side, and it's one of the least upgradable 14-inch laptops tested. The only positive I can mention is at least the single M.2 storage slot can fit drives with chips on both sides, and Wi-Fi can be upgraded. The Blade 14 is powered by a 72 watt-hour battery. The display tab of the Synapse software lets you enable battery refresh rate, which automatically lowers the screen's refresh rate to 60 Hz when you unplug the charger to save power. The screen doesn't need to flash black during the change like other laptops, and it goes back to 120 Hz when you plug back in. You can also use the Function Plus R shortcut to swap between refresh rates at any time. Battery Health Optimizer is disabled by default, but you can use this to limit the maximum charge of the battery between 50 to 80% in 5% increments. This helps improve the longevity of the battery, as keeping it fully charged for extended periods can degrade it. Battery life was great. Not the best 14-inch gaming laptop tested, but it's definitely right up there with some of the best results. It actually lasted for the exact same amount of time as the last Blade 14 I tested a couple of years ago, at least in the YouTube video playback test. This year's model lasted 17% longer with a game running, as Nvidia's newer 50 series GPUs are more power efficient. It only lost 12% of its battery charge while asleep for 24 hours. But this isn't a fair comparison with the other laptops, as it depends on the size of the laptop's battery. Here's how much battery power was lost on average per hour, which is a fair comparison, and it had one of the slowest drain rates measured so far, and comparable to the other 14-inch laptops tested. Let's check out thermals next. The CPU and GPU are covered by a vapor chamber cooler with Honeywell PTM 7958 thermal interface material. Two fans bring air in through holes in the bottom panel and through the keyboard, and exhaust it down and out the back, so no hot air blowing on your mouse hand. Razer's Synapse software allows us to change between different performance modes, which from lowest to highest are silent, balanced, performance, and custom. You can change the fan in any mode between auto, a specified fixed fan speed, or you can set a manual fan curve for the CPU and GPU separately to set fan speed based on temperature. You can use the CPU voltage optimizer in any mode, which lets you undervolt the processor. On battery mode, you only get access to balanced mode and a little fan control, and you can use the function plus P shortcut to cycle between the performance modes. Custom mode lets you set separate CPU and GPU profiles. If the GPU is on high, then the CPU can't go above medium, and if the CPU is on high, the GPU can't go above medium. So you can't have both the CPU and GPU maxed out, but you can set the GPU to high and manually set the CPU power limit up to 95 watts. You can overclock the GPU through here too, but Razer doesn't apply a default value, so we haven't tested with an arbitrary value. The internal temperatures are fine at idle. The rest of the results are from combined CPU and GPU stress tests, which aim to represent a worst-case full-load scenario. But these are mostly relatively cool for a smaller 14-inch gaming laptop. Custom mode is a little warmer on either the CPU or GPU, depending on which one is set to high, as you'd expect. Running with the lid closed was around 5 degrees Celsius warmer than lid open, as the blade pulls air in through the keyboard, so keep that in mind if you plan on docking the laptop. Using a stand was able to lower temps by about 3 degrees, and the stand was a little better than using my cooling pad at 800 RPM. The pad I test with is linked below. Increasing the pad's fan speed lowered temps further, but it's not really worth it for the extra fan noise. There's no thermal throttling happening, so CPU and GPU clock speeds are very similar in most cases. The extra air from the pad does allow them to boost slightly higher, but again, the small improvement isn't worth it for the extra fan noise, which you'll hear soon. The CPU only gets around 25 watts of power when the CPU and GPU are loaded up at the same time, unless you set the CPU to high, where it gets a generous 35 watts. But I think this is fine for 3 reasons. The first is AMD processors usually benefit less than Intel by adding more power. The second is the processor is only a 10-core part, so it doesn't need tons of power to reach good clock speeds. And third, I'd rather have the GPU get prioritized so that it can run games well, especially with its high 2880 by 1800 resolution. Strangely, the NVIDIA control panel reports this 5070 as being able to boost up to 125 watts with dynamic boost. I've never seen that before. I thought the highest was 115, and that's what's listed in Razer's marketing. In any case, what we're seeing here is the same as other full-powered 5070s I've tested in bigger laptops. So this is what I'd classify as a full-powered 5070 laptop GPU. Here's how an actual game performs with the different performance modes in use. I've got Cyberpunk 2077 at ultra settings running at native in purple, and DLSS upscaling on balanced in red to boost performance. Even with the screen's native 2880 by 1800 resolution, we're still able to get above 60 FPS with DLSS. And that's possible in all modes but silent. Even on Type-C charge is running well. But that's pulling power away from the battery and wouldn't be sustainable for a long time. 2 minutes in Cyberpunk used up 3% of its charge. At least the software warns you about it, I guess. The CPU can use more power in a CPU-only workload like Cinebench, where the GPU is idle. Custom mode lets us drag the power slider up to 95 watts, but thermal throttling became the limit in this workload, so we saw less than this. Multi-core performance is only 13% better compared to the last-gen Blade from a couple of years ago, while Asus's Zephyrus G14 is almost 16% ahead of the Blade, as it has a higher-tier Ryzen processor with 2 extra cores. But hey, the Blade is 62% ahead of Ace's equally expensive Triton 14. Performance lowers if we unplug the charger and run on battery power, and the older Blade was actually performing better here, both in terms of single and multi-core performance. I can't say I noticed any problems when casually using it on battery power though. As for keyboard temps, most laptops I test are in the low 30 degrees Celsius range on the keyboard at idle, but the Blade was running warmer. It feels a little warm, but it's not uncomfortable. It gets warmer with the stress test running, and the wrist rest feels a little warm as the metal chassis conducts heat. It's similar in balanced mode, as the fans run faster to compensate for the extra power. The WASD area feels cold as air comes in through the keyboard. Performance mode is similar too. Warmish wrist rest, cold WASD, while the middle feels warm but not uncomfortable. The back above the F keys is hot, but you don't need to touch there. I tested 2 of the custom modes, and ultimately things aren't too different here either. The keyboard hotspot was on the warmer side when compared to all laptops, but it's actually a great result relative to other 14-inch laptops. Smaller laptops just have less space for cooling, so higher temps are usually expected in exchange for good performance. But it doesn't matter if the fans make us deaf. Let's have a listen. The fans were off when idling in silent mode. Fan noise gets louder in the higher modes, as you'd expect, and I didn't find there to be any difference in fan noise with the fan set to auto or max, meaning they're already maxed out in this workload while set to auto. But fan noise is on the lower side relative to most other laptops tested. It's slightly quieter compared to ASUS's better performing Zephyrus G14, and way quieter compared to Acer's Triton 14, which had a perceived loudness 42% higher than the Blade. Still, if you want quieter fans, you could run with balanced mode instead, as performance mode had a 33% perceived higher fan noise compared to balanced. And as we saw, performance in games wasn't really that much lower in balanced mode, so that's looking like a nice sweet spot in terms of fan noise to performance. Alright, screen next. The Blade has a 14-inch OLED screen with a high resolution. Well, it's the same resolution as the Triton 14 and Zephyrus G14, but it's overkill for its size. The screen looks great, and we get the usual benefits from OLED, including excellent color gamut, perfect contrast, and no backlight bleed. We measured brightness at around 400 nits, with HDR in red slightly brighter than SDR in blue. It's one of the lower results for an OLED panel, but this could just be the panel lottery at play, as it's using the exact same panel model as the Zephyrus G14. Basically, there are small differences in screen brightness, even between the same panel model. OLED panels can suffer from burn-in in the long term, and unlike most other laptop brands, I didn't see any built-in options to help mitigate this through software. PWM flickering is present, which can give some people a headache after long use, and the glossy screen is something to be aware of, as it's reflective and can be annoying if you're working in a bright environment. OLED is known for its super fast screen response times, and that's the case here too, with all transitions occurring in less than a millisecond. It's in line with other OLED panels we've tested. They're all fast, and there's no real point trying to distinguish between them in this regard, as the differences are so minor. And again, they can vary a bit even with the same panel model. The total system latency was close to this year's 14-inch competition. This is the time between a mouse click and when a gunshot fire shows up on screen in Counter-Strike 2, and it's perfectly fine. The Blade has advanced Optimus, allowing you to automatically get better FPS in games without a reboot. It's also got the classic muck switch, but that needs a reboot and is only available through BIOS anyway. And considering it doesn't change which GPU the ports connect to, there's no real point using it. G-Sync is available with Optimus off, and FreeSync is available from the integrated graphics when Optimus is on. So no screen tearing as long as you're above 48 FPS, which can be hard at times at the native 2880 by 1800 resolution. There's a 1080p camera above the screen in the middle. It has IR for Windows Hello Face Unlock, and this is what it sounds like while typing on the keyboard. Alright, let's see what the Blade 14 can do in games. We've tested it with these settings. Cyberpunk 2077 was running well at 1080p ultra settings at over 100 FPS. It's very close to larger laptops with the same RTX 5070 graphics inside, quite impressive for its size. And then at 1440p, its average frame rate is basically tied with Lenovo's larger Pro 5i. The Blade even ends up with a higher 1% low, so less dips in performance and more stable, consistent frame rates. Black Myth Wukong was running around 70 FPS at 1080p high settings, and again, it's close to a number of other bigger 5070 laptops, despite the Blade having less room for cooling. That continues at 1440p too. I believe Asus's G14 is the only 14-inch gaming laptop with 5070 Ti and above graphics right now, and that was only 16% faster in this one. Performance is still great for a 5070 laptop in Alan Wake 2, though some of those thicker 5070 laptops have much better 1% lows in this one. I suspect their higher CPU power limits that are possible from having bigger coolers is starting to help here. There's much less of a difference in 1% lows at 1440p though, presumably as the workload becomes more GPU bound. Performance is still quite good with ray tracing and DLSS upscaling enabled. Generally, the Blade was a little behind those Legion laptops with 5070s now, but it was still ahead of Gigabyte's Aero X16 and Acer's Triton 14, both of which have lower GPU power limits. And more GPU power means more FPS. The 8 gigs of VRAM from the RTX 5070 laptop GPU, paired with that 2880 by 1800 screen, is a bit of a concern, for all the reasons I covered in this video with Steve from Hardware Unboxed. Maybe it won't be a problem for you today, or even for a while, depending on the games you play and setting levels you play at, but it's definitely something worth thinking about when you're spending Razer Blade kind of money, as presumably you're going to be using this laptop for the next few years. Most of the 14-inch gaming laptops currently available all max out with the RTX 5070 laptop graphics, and I'm guessing that's just because it's harder to pack in a more powerful GPU into such a small space. But it can be done, and if you're after more VRAM, then I'd suggest checking out Asus's Zephyrus G14 with 5070 Ti instead. Here are the 3D Mark results. Creator performance was relatively low in DaVinci Resolve, but quite good in Adobe Photoshop. For some reason, Ryzen CPUs seem to do well in this test, regardless of the GPU they're paired with. Otherwise, the Blade's nice OLED screen and fast microSD card slot would be nice for creators on the go. The BIOS looks extremely basic and dated compared to other brands, but the usual core functionality is there. There's not much in the way of customization that's not already available through software. Linux support was excellent. The only thing that didn't work was my 6 GHz Wi-Fi network, but that's never worked for these MediaTek cards with the Live CD driver. Pricing and availability will change over time, so check those links below the video for updates and to see if there are any current sales. If the Blade 14 has a good sale, we'll list it on our gaminglaptop.deals website. We update that every day to include the best sales, so make sure you check it out regularly to save money on your next gaming laptop with that link below. At the time of recording in early October, the entry-level Blade 14 with RTX 5060 graphics and 16 gigs of RAM is on sale for $1,700 US, though it's normally $2,300. So yeah, definitely worth waiting for those sales. The RTX 5070 version with double the RAM costs an extra $300, while the maxed out version I've tested here with 64 gigs of RAM is currently on sale for $2,400, though it's usually $3,000. So as expected, the Blade 14 is not cheap. But is it even worth considering? Let's summarize the good and the bad to find out. Starting with the good, the Blade 14's build quality is on another level, as it's CNC milled from a solid block of aluminum. It's extremely portable. The Blade is the thinnest 14-inch gaming laptop we've tested, and it's one of the lightest too. Its OLED screen looks great, battery life is good, and there's a reasonable amount of tuning available through software, even if the BIOS is lacking. Gaming performance was close to bigger and heavier gaming laptops with the same GPU, so you're not missing out on FPS by going for a smaller laptop. Thermals are decent too. The fans don't get too loud and it doesn't feel hot. The Blade's keyboard lighting looks nicer than most other laptops, and Linux support is excellent. As for the bad, the Synapse software could use some improvements. Specifically, the keyboard lighting not working properly after boot until you manually open it. Smaller laptop means upgrades are limited to Wi-Fi card and one M.2 slot. Soldered RAM feels like a kick in the teeth when the last Blade 14 I tested in 2023 had 2 SODIMM slots. I suppose at least you've got the option of buying a newer Blade with 64 gigs if you're rich. But that's the other problem. The Blade is pricey. Even with the sale, the 5070 Blade 14 goes for $2,000 US. We've had Asus's Zephyrus G14 on the deal site a couple of times for that same price. And the G14 has a higher tier processor with 2 extra cores, and more importantly, Nvidia's RTX 5070 Ti graphics with 50% more VRAM, which will just give it more longevity in games. Not to mention just straight up more FPS today, with 13% to 18% more frames across our 3 review games. Don't get me wrong, I like the Blade and think it's a great laptop overall. I don't really have too much to complain about, but for the same price, personally, I'd get the more powerful G14 instead, and that's why I find myself unable to recommend the Blade, unless it has something specific that you're really after. Of course, the G14 has its own problems too. Nothing in life is perfect, so check out this one next before spending your hard-earned money.